Welcome to today's Explainer. We've got a seriously ambitious goal for this one. We are going to condense thousands of years of history, millions of square miles of land, and the stories of hundreds of millions of people into a single, cohesive narrative. We're looking at exactly how the United States of America was forged. It's a massive story of transformation, going from an ancient, empty wilderness all the way to a global powerhouse.
Okay, let's dive into this. If we're going to wrap our heads around a country of this staggering scale, we really need to start with two fundamental questions. How was the USA born, and what kind of country is it right now? And to figure that out, we have to look past the borders and look directly at the people.
You might have heard the unofficial motto of the United States, E Pluribus Unum, which means out of many, one. Well, looking at the 300 million people who make up the country today, you can see that motto is a literal reality. We're looking at a population that is roughly 67% white, 13% Hispanic, 13% black, 4% Asian, and 1% Native American. It's truly a nation of immigrants and native peoples. Just a massive melting pot where folks speak different languages and hold wildly different ideas, yet they all fall under one flag.
So here is our roadmap for the Explainer today. We'll be taking a fast-paced journey, starting with forging a new nation, moving right into the fight for freedom, decoding how the government works, exploring the American way of life, and finally touring a vast and varied land.
Chapter 1, Forging a New Nation. From empty lands to expanding borders.
All right, I want you to picture a vast, beautiful, completely empty wilderness, roughly 16,000 years ago, just before the very first people traveled south from Alaska to become the Native Americans. Now, fast forward to the 17th century, and the blistering pace of this new nation's growth is just staggering. In 1607, the British founded Jamestown, where those early colonists struggled immensely to just survive. A few years later, in 1620, the Pilgrims arrive at Plymouth on the Mayflower. They actually managed to survive their harsh first year, largely thanks to a Native American man named Squanto, who taught them how to hunt and grow corn. By 1776, the 13 colonies declared their independence from Britain. And man, once they were independent, the growth absolutely exploded. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson secured the Louisiana Purchase from France for a mere $15 million, which basically multiplied the nation's size overnight. And by 1867, they bought Alaska from Russia. So, in the historical blink of an eye, this nation suddenly stretched from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific.
Let's bring this macro history down to a micro, universally recognizable symbol. Look at the number 50. The famous Stars and Stripes flag has exactly 50 stars on it, and each one represents a state. As that rapid expansion we just talked about kept happening, a star was added every single time a new state joined the Union. The final, 50th star, that wasn't actually added until 1959, which is when the beautiful Pacific Islands of Hawaii officially joined the USA.
Chapter 2, The Fight for Freedom, Conflict and Civil Rights. And this brilliantly illustrates a much darker chapter, because that rapid expansion was far from peaceful. The growing pains of this young nation left some incredibly deep scars, which culminated in a tragic divide that completely tore the country apart in 1861, the Civil War. You have the North, led by President Abraham Lincoln, which had more men, more factories, and was arguing against the expansion of slavery. On the other side, the South was heavily reliant on the enormous wealth generated by slaves working their cotton fields. They wanted independence to maintain that pro-slavery economy, and they boasted some brilliant military leaders like Robert E. Lee. It was a devastating, bloody conflict that eventually resulted in the North's victory and the end of institutional slavery, but it cost at least 600,000 lives.
But the end of the Civil War absolutely did not mean the end of the struggle, not even close. Over the next century, heroic individuals relentlessly fought against institutional prejudice and segregation. Take Harriet Tubman, for instance, a former slave who bravely and repeatedly returned to the dangerous South starting in 1849 to help over 300 others escape via the Underground Railway. Or Rosa Parks, who in 1955 sparked a massive, non-violent movement simply by refusing to give up her bus seat to a white man in Alabama. These relentless, courageous efforts ultimately culminated decades later with the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Law.
And honestly, you cannot talk about that civil rights law without pausing on this exact moment. I have a dream. Just let the power of that quote resonate for a second. Spoken by churchman Martin Luther King Jr. in Washington, D.C. to a crowd of 200,000 people. He nonviolently championed equal rights for the nation's 39 million Black Americans, and his dream completely reshaped the moral fabric of the country.
Chapter 3, How the Government Works. The Engine of the Nation.
So, with a population this massive, spanning wildly different histories and backgrounds, how does this country actually govern itself without falling apart? The crucial secret is the rule of three. To prevent any one group from gaining too much power, to stop tyranny before it starts, the government was designed with three separate but perfectly equal parts to ensure strict balance. First up, we have Congress, which is divided into the Senate and the House of Representatives, and their job is to make the laws. Second is the president, who acts as the chief of the country and head of the army, elected for a 4-year term. And third, we have the Supreme Court, a panel of 9 judges whose sole job is to decode those laws and make absolutely sure the other two branches aren't stepping out of line.
Now, driving that government engine are two major political parties, and the differences between them really just boil down to fundamental philosophical approaches to society and economics. The Republicans generally focus on self-reliance and argue that taxes should be kept low. On the flip side, the Democrats generally believe that the government should actively step in to help the poor and provide social services, which of course relies on gathering taxes to fund those programs.
Chapter 4. The American Way of Life, Culture and Daily Routine.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that we are shifting gears completely from politics to arguably the United States' biggest export to the world, its culture. It's fascinating how the massive global music industry traces its roots directly back to incredibly specific American communities. It actually all started with the work songs of Black American slaves, which evolved into the blues in Mississippi with artists like Muddy Waters. Down in New Orleans, jazz was born, popularized by absolute icons like Louis Armstrong. Meanwhile, in Nashville, country music took hold with legends like Johnny Cash. And later, in the 1990s in New York, rap emerged from the streets, giving us artists like Eminem. These highly localized, regional sounds just exploded to dominate the world's radios.
Okay, time for a quick pattern interrupt, because if you step into the daily life of an everyday American, some things are delightfully quirky compared to the rest of the globe. For starters, Americans write their dates backwards. July 4th is 7-4, not 4-7. They completely ignore the metric system, choosing to weigh things in pounds and measure distances in miles. And we have to talk about car culture. Dating all the way back to Henry Ford's affordable Model T in 1908, Americans just love to drive. Today, over 85% of families own a car, and they use them for everything, going to drive-in restaurants, coffee shops, even drive-through banks.
And seriously, where are they driving to? The food.
America is the ultimate culinary melting pot, which is a literal reflection of those diverse demographics we looked at earlier. Immigrants brought their favorite recipes, creating totally unique hybrid styles. You've got Tex-Mex, which is this delicious blend of Texas and Mexican food, Cajun, a super spicy cooking style from Louisiana featuring dishes like gumbo, and soul food from the South, featuring rich meats, green vegetables, and sweet potatoes. Sure, they are famous worldwide for fast food like hamburgers, French fries, and having a Starbucks coffee shop on every corner, but the real story is in these amazing regional cuisines.
Chapter 5. A vast and varied land. Geographic extremes. None of this culture or history really makes full sense until you zoom out and look at the staggering physical extremes of the landscape itself. This single nation contains environments so completely different they might as well be alien planets. On one hand, you have Death Valley down in California, 86 meters below sea level, where temperatures have hit a blistering 56.7 degrees Celsius. And then, in the exact same country, you have Mount McKinley up in Alaska, soaring 6,194 meters into the sky, featuring freezing temperatures and long, brutally dark winters.
And when human engineering meets this massive natural scale, the statistics are just mind-boggling. 40 million. That is the number of journeys made across just one single bridge, the iconic Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, every single year. It really stands as a testament to the sheer volume of movement and life across this vast land.
And you see that massive scale reflected in landmarks all across the 50 states. Natural wonders, like the Grand Canyon in Arizona, which is a gorge dropping 1,600 meters deep, or Yellowstone National Park, famous for its Old Faithful geyser shooting boiling hot water right into the sky. And the man-made wonders? They are just as oversized. Mount Rushmore features the giant faces of 4 US presidents carved directly into the side of a mountain. And the Mall of America in Minneapolis? It's a shopping center so unimaginably big, you could literally park 32 Boeing 747 airplanes inside of it.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. We've gone from empty lands 16,000 years ago to the arrival of struggling settlers through a brutal civil war, the heroic fight for civil rights, and the rise of a global cultural powerhouse. Out of many lands, peoples, cultures, and ideas, one incredibly complex, 300 million person nation was forged. And it's an ongoing, ever-changing experiment. So, considering all the massive history and diversity we've just unpacked together,
I want to leave you with this. What do you think the next chapter of the American story will look like?